So I guess the best way of talking about this work is to tell you about how the project started and how my thinking evolved over the 5 years it took me to make the work. But first, an anecdote. When I was a teenager, a family friend, a young man from Edmonton, came to visit us in Toronto. He had just returned from a 5-year stint teaching in Africa. And he told this story of coming home after being away for 2 years, getting off the plane in Edmonton, walking into the airport, and thinking everybody there was his friend or his family. He just thought he recognized absolutely everybody. They were so familiar to him. In fact, they were strangers, and he was shocked by this. He would be saying hello and smiling and get no reaction. And he finally realized that what had happened was that he had forgotten how to read white faces, because for years he'd been surrounded by African faces. And he was shocked by this, and of course I was shocked by this, because I thought, well, how could you forget like what people look like, you know, because you haven't seen them for only 2 years or 3 years. Like how could you forget? On the other hand, it also struck me that it would be amazing to think that you were connected to everybody. Anyway, that was the 1960s. And since then, I've lived in lots of different places in Canada and in other countries. And my friends and my family are from many different parts of the world. Their faces reflect the DNA history of their ancestors. And I've learned to read all different kinds of faces. It's become a fascination for me. And this project certainly fed that fascination. So I struggle with the idea of calling them portraits, because what is a portrait? And it's a complicated question, because there are different expectations around portraiture. Some portraits are meant to celebrate the significance of a well-known person's life, and some are meant to remind us of an individual's power or money or influence. Some are to remind us of loved ones who have died, and some are commissioned by the subject, others commissioned by groups who admire the subject, or perhaps the subject is simply admired by the artist. We're all fascinated by other people's lives, and a portrait can focus our thoughts on that person and their contribution to our history or our modern life. As for portraits of people with no power, money, or influence, they are often portrayed to bring attention to injustice, poverty, or the particular uniqueness of a group of people. In my case, I just wanted to portray people I know or have met. I wanted to include them casually without criteria, beyond their agreement to let me make a portrait of them. They are significant to me because they have spent time with me and given me something of themselves. And I know some of you are the subjects of some of these portraits, so I thank you for your agreement to being involved with it. So I didn't actually immediately arrive at this idea of doing a lot of portraits. The project developed out of another project, one that I participated in through SNAP. Participants were made up of a group of university students and a group of skills clients interested in making art. Skills is an organization that works with people with disabilities. The project, called Making Our Mark, was a 4-day creative exploration of the idea of citizenship. What does it mean to be a citizen? Who gets to be a citizen? What are the characteristics of citizenship? My group, half students and half skills clients, explored these questions through play. Not games or sport, but the kind of play children engage in, where everyone is equally responsible for having fun. And we had a lot of fun. Partway through this project, I thought I could make portraits of everyone involved in order to make an interactive game for the final exhibition. I got permission and brought in a box of hats and noses and objects for people to use in case they wanted to present themselves disguised. I didn't want anyone to feel exposed by this process. Some people did choose disguises, and some presented themselves as they were. These 25 portraits took me a whole year to finish. During that year, I decided to make portraits of everyone I know, a large portrait project of citizens. I got permission from Skills to include the portraits I had already finished and immediately decided to call it Citizen of the World, because even though it would be a selection of people, each of them is a citizen of the world. So to create the Linocut, I took an iPad photograph of each person as my reference guide. I realized as I began photographing people that I needed to do more than just get their permission. So I needed to have them choose the photograph they wanted me to use so they could participate in how they were being presented. A Linocut is not a photograph. It requires interpretation of the source image. But still, I felt the subjects would be happier if they liked the photograph that I used. For the most part, everyone has reacted positively to my portraits. Only one friend bluntly told me that she didn't like hers, and I'm pretty sure there have been a few others who were disappointed. The process had its difficulties. Sometimes the light was not very good, so the information I had to work with was skimpy. Sometimes after reducing the tonal values of the photograph, important information was lost, and I didn't realize it until I was proofing the print. Sometimes my knife cut something it shouldn't have. I've remade about 15 of the portraits due to errors caused by these difficulties. One portrait was missing a nose, for example, and had to be redone. Everyone who participated got a print of the portrait I made of them and could withdraw from the project if they wished. Only one friend did withdraw her portrait. Despite my best intentions that the project should finish with a total of 300 portraits, I wasn't very stringent about the format, and so there are some anomalies. There are 300 pieces of paper on which 304 people and one dog are portrayed. In 2 cases, I actually made 2 or 3 portraits at the person's request. I also made 2 portraits of people at 2 different times in their lives, and I made 2 self-portraits. Not all of these versions are included in the project. As in nature, nothing handmade is perfect. I printed all the portraits on a Vandercook letterpress at Snap. The printing took place over several days in several years. Setting up the furniture slightly differently and mixing the ink slightly differently each time created imperfections. You might notice those, but please know that I have allowed them all because it's the one way the work reflects humanity portrayed. All right, so because I don't tell stories about the people who are in the portraits, I decided to collect some basic statistics. So you just have an idea of the diversity. Of the 304 people, 124 are male and 180 are female. I didn't actually ask anyone how they identify, so because that was not the purpose of the project. There are 10 children who were at the time under the age of 15 or 16, or 15, and 6 individuals have died since I made their portraits. In the end, there are portraits of 68 friends, 18 relatives, 51 people I met at Snap, and 143 acquaintances who I met in a variety of circumstances. The portraits have been exhibited in 3 iterations. The first 126 were displayed in the front window of the Snap print shop on Jasper Avenue. That was really great because people walking by would just stop and look at it. I just loved the exposure it got. The second showing was 205 portraits at the Incubator Gallery at Harcourt House. And for that exhibition, I offered an open call so some of their members or viewers would have a chance to be in the project. For the third exhibition, where they were shown was at the McMullen Gallery, and I offered 2 opportunities for people there to participate. And this brought me very close to my goal of 300 portraits. I managed to add a few more people to bring me to what I thought was my total. Clearly, dealing with so many pieces of paper meant that my counting was not very accurate. The majority of participants, 193, live in Alberta. And of those, 180 live in Edmonton and 5 live in Calgary. The provinces are represented by 32 people in Ontario, 3 in Nova Scotia, 2 in Manitoba, 5 in BC, and 1 in Quebec. There are people who live in 8 other countries, 23 in the US, 15 in the United Kingdom, 12 in France, 5 in Italy, 2 in Switzerland, 2 in Germany, and 2 in China. All right, this brings me to what I learned about people, how people think about having their portrait done. This was the most fascinating thing for me, the conversations that I had with people while we were taking pictures and talking about it. And some people, you know, there were just different attitudes. Some people wanted affirmation that they look good, and some people wanted the portrait to reflect how they see themselves. And for some, a portrait made them feel worthy. Some people really talked about that, and some people, for example, didn't want to choose the photograph that I used. They wanted me to choose it. And so I had to kind of talk about what we look like and what would make them feel good about themselves. It was really interesting. I had to sort of be very delicate about it, but I found it really fascinating. For some people, they were just curious about the whole process, and some felt it was a way to be included, and some just agreed because they wanted to support me. But no matter what the reason, I'm completely grateful for each individual's participation, and I tried hard to give everybody something that they would value. I know I didn't completely succeed with this, but for me, the project was this amazing, ongoing, lovely thing where I would talk to people and learn something about them and just enjoy being in their presence. It was just really great. I just want to say that in this strange time of both needing to come together because of the pandemic and needing to come together to solve global problems, the ones we face, many of us citizens of the world are bent on separating us from each other, sometimes through politics, social shaming, gender and sexual preference labeling, exclusion from civil rights, discrimination based on very little information, generation blaming, etc. The boxes we shove each other into and ourselves into, in my view, do not help. We are complex individuals, both needing to be understood and needing to understand. Understanding each other through inquiry, communication, with a genuine interest in each other is perhaps the best hope we have to survive with our humanity intact. Here in these prints is my small view of our beloved human collective. Please consider them with an open heart. Thank you.